The tranquil morning at Seabreeze Inn shattered with a single thud. Linda gripped the kitchen counter, her weathered hands trembling as waves of dizziness washed over her. The pot of oatmeal she'd been stirring for her beloved granddaughter Grace bubbled ominously on the stovetop, forgotten as Linda's world began to tilt sideways. In her decades of running the charming beachside inn, Linda had never felt anything like this before. The morning had started normally enough, the salt-laden breeze drifting through open windows, the gentle crash of waves providing a soothing backdrop as she prepared breakfast for her guests. Grace, still peaceful in her morning slumber upstairs, had no idea her grandmother was in danger. "Help!" Linda tried to call out, but her words slurred and died in her throat. The room spun faster, kitchen tiles blurring beneath her feet. One side of her body felt oddly heavy, unresponsive. Only Rocky, the inn's beloved African grey parrot, witnessed Linda's distress from his perch near the kitchen window. The intelligent bird had been Linda's companion for years, entertaining guests with his extensive vocabulary and uncanny ability to mimic sounds. Now, his keen eyes tracked every wobble of Linda's increasingly unstable movements. Rachel, Linda's most trusted employee, wasn't due to arrive for another hour. The handful of guests were still asleep in their rooms, the inn peaceful in these early morning hours. Linda had always prided herself on being independent, handling everything from cooking to maintenance. But now, as darkness crept into the edges of her vision, that independence had become a liability. Another wave of dizziness struck. Linda's legs gave way, and she crumpled to the floor. The pot of oatmeal continued to bubble, steam rising ominously. As consciousness began to slip away, Linda's last coherent thought was of Grace, her precious granddaughter sleeping soundly upstairs, blissfully unaware that her grandmother lay helpless on the cold kitchen floor. Rocky's feathers ruffled with agitation. He hopped from foot to foot on his perch, head cocked as he observed Linda's still form. The parrot had seen his beloved owner cooking, cleaning, and going about her daily routines countless times, but never like this, never silent and motionless on the floor. The oatmeal began to burn, filling the kitchen with an acrid smell. Rocky's instincts told him something was terribly wrong. What happened next would prove that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected sources, and that intelligence and loyalty can manifest in extraordinary ways. But first, Rocky had to make a choice, one that would change everything at Seabreeze Inn forever. Rocky's agitation grew as smoke began curling from the forgotten pot on the stove. The parrot's sharp mind, honed by years of observation and interaction with humans, processed the scene before him. His beloved Linda remained motionless on the floor, her breathing shallow and irregular. The African grey had always been more than just a pet at Seabreeze Inn. Linda had rescued him years ago from a troubled situation, nursing him back to health when he was injured and frightened. Since then, he'd become an integral part of the inn's charm, learning to mimic not just words, but entire phrases and sounds he heard regularly. Now, watching Linda lie helpless, Rocky recalled all the times he'd heard the phone ring, observed Linda answer it, listened to her call for help when something went wrong. His remarkable memory contained countless patterns of human behavior, sounds, and responses stored away like a library of survival knowledge. With determined focus, Rocky began to emit a perfect reproduction of the inn's phone ring tone, a sound he'd heard thousands of times. When no one responded, he switched tactics, recreating the sound of urgent knocking at the door. Still nothing. The smoke from the burning oatmeal grew thicker. In her room upstairs, little Grace stirred in her sleep, innocent and unaware of the drama unfolding in the kitchen below. The tiny girl had been staying at the inn with her grandmother while her parents traveled for work, a common arrangement that usually brought joy to both grandmother and granddaughter. Linda had delighted in cooking special breakfasts for Grace, telling her stories about the sea and watching her play on the beach. Rocky knew Grace's room. He'd often perched outside her window, entertaining her with his repertoire of sounds and words. The bird made a crucial decision. Spreading his wings, he flew from his perch to the kitchen window, which Linda always left partially open to catch the sea breeze. With careful maneuvering, he squeezed through the gap and took flight around the building's exterior. The morning air carried the salty scent of the ocean, and distant waves crashed against the shore. Rocky navigated to Grace's second-floor window, landing on the familiar windowsill. Through the glass, he could see the child beginning to stir. The parrot began tapping insistently on the window with his beak, creating a sharp, urgent sound. Grace sat up in bed, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She recognized Rocky immediately, her grandmother's clever bird who always made her laugh. But something felt different about his presence this morning. Rocky's usually neat feathers were ruffled, his movements jerky and agitated. The bird kept looking down toward the kitchen window, then back at Grace and performing an urgent dance on the windowsill. "Rocky!" Grace called softly, climbing out of bed. She approached the window, still in her pajamas. The parrot's behavior grew more frantic. He began reproducing a sound that made Grace's heart skip, her grandmother's voice calling, "Help!" but distorted and slurred, exactly as Linda had tried to speak before collapsing. Grace's young mind might not have understood everything, but she knew something was wrong. She'd grown up hearing stories about how smart Rocky was, how he understood things other birds didn't. Now, watching his desperate attempts to communicate, she felt fear settle in her stomach. The smell of smoke began to drift up from below. Meanwhile, Rachel, the inn's dedicated employee, was arriving early for her shift. She'd worked at Seabreeze Inn for years. Drawn by Linda's kindness and the peaceful atmosphere of the place, as she walked up the shell-lined path to the inn's entrance, she noticed something odd. Rocky was outside, behavior she'd never witnessed before. The parrot, spotting Rachel, immediately swooped down from Grace's window. He landed on a nearby post, unleashing a cacophony of urgent sounds. The phones ring, Linda's distressed voice, the smoke alarms beep. Rachel's steps quickened. Something was definitely wrong. Through the kitchen window, she could see smoke beginning to fill the room. Breaking into a run, Rachel rushed to the front door, fumbling with her keys. The smell of burning oatmeal grew stronger as she finally got the door open. The scene that greeted her made her blood run cold. Linda sprawled on the kitchen floor, the smoking pot on the stove, and Grace, who had made her way downstairs, standing frozen in the doorway. Rachel's first aid training kicked in immediately. She rushed to turn off the stove, then dropped to her knees beside Linda, checking for vital signs while pulling out her phone to call emergency services. Rocky landed on his perch, watching intently as Rachel began CPR. The parrot's unusual behavior had brought help in time, but Linda's condition remained critical. As Rachel spoke urgently with the emergency dispatcher, she kept glancing at the remarkable bird who had raised the alarm. Without Rocky's intelligence and dedication, the situation could have been much worse. Grace stood trembling in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Rachel, while maintaining pressure on Linda's chest as instructed by the dispatcher, tried to comfort the frightened child. "Your grandmother is strong, Grace. Help is coming. Rocky did a very brave thing today." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the morning peace of the beachside community. Rocky remained unusually quiet now, his mission accomplished, watching as paramedics rushed into the kitchen. Their quick assessment confirmed what Rachel had suspected. Linda had suffered a stroke. As they loaded Linda onto a stretcher, Rocky flew to Grace's shoulder, gently preening her hair in a comforting gesture. The bond between the intelligent bird and the humans he'd helped save was about to grow even stronger, but the crisis wasn't over yet. Linda's condition remained uncertain, and the challenges facing her family were just beginning. The morning sun climbed higher over the ocean, its rays filtering through the smoke-hazed kitchen windows. In the chaos of emergency responders and worried guests awakened by the commotion, no one noticed Rocky return to his perch, his bright eyes following every movement, every action. The parrot had proven himself more than just a beloved pet. He was a guardian, a protector, and his role in this unfolding drama was far from over. The emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos as medical staff rushed to treat Linda. Rachel sat in the waiting area, holding a still trembling Grace close to her side. She'd already called Grace's parents, who were rushing back from their business trip, but it would take them several hours to arrive. Back at Seabreeze Inn, Rocky refused to leave his perch by the kitchen window, as if standing guard over Linda's domain. The parrot's behavior had changed noticeably. Gone were his usual cheerful mimicry and playful antics. Instead, he maintained a watchful silence. breaking it only to produce perfect imitations of Linda's voice when guests passed by, as if trying to maintain her presence in the inn. Rachel had quickly organized the other staff members to handle the day's operations, but the inn felt different without Linda's warm presence. The regular guests, many of whom had been coming to Seabreeze for years, gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones about the morning's events. The story of Rocky's remarkable actions spread quickly, with many guests recounting their own experiences with the intelligent bird. At the hospital, doctors worked to assess the extent of Linda's stroke. The emergency room physician, Dr. Sarah, approached Rachel and Grace with a measured expression. "The fact that help arrived so quickly gives us hope," she explained gently, "but the next few days will be critical." Grace clung tighter to Rachel, her young mind struggling to process the situation. She had never seen her grandmother so still, so vulnerable, the usually vibrant woman who told her stories about the sea and taught her to make seashell necklaces, now lay connected to beeping machines, fighting for her life. Rachel's thoughts drifted to the incredible sequence of events that had brought them here. If Rocky hadn't acted so decisively, if she hadn't arrived early for her shift, if Grace hadn't understood the Parrot's warning, any slight deviation might have led to a tragically different outcome. The weight of these what-ifs pressed heavily on her shoulders. As afternoon faded into evening, Linda was moved to the intensive care unit. The hospital staff had made an unusual exception, allowing Grace to visit briefly. Understanding the child's need to see her grandmother, Rachel watched as Grace approached the hospital bed cautiously, her small hand reaching out to touch Linda's. "Grandma," Grace whispered, her voice trembling. "Rocky saved you. He was so brave, just like in the stories you tell me about heroes of the sea." Rachel felt tears welling up in her eyes as she watched the tender scene. Back at Seabreeze Inn, the evening brought its own challenges. Rocky had begun a new behavior that astonished the staff and guests alike. He flew methodically from room to room, checking on guests just as Linda would have done, stopping at each door as if taking mental inventory. The bird even visited the kitchen periodically, watching the replacement cook with what seemed like critical attention. One of the longtime guests, Mrs. Henderson, observed Rocky's behavior with wonder. "In all my years of coming here, I've never seen anything like it," she remarked to Rachel during a phone call updating her about the inn situation. "It's as if he's trying to fill Linda's shoes." The night brought its own set of worries. Grace Masson, exhausted from the day's emotions, had finally fallen asleep in a chair next to her grandmother's hospital bed. Rachel kept vigil, alternating between watching Linda's vital signs and checking her phone for updates from the inn's staff. Linda's condition remained stable but critical. The doctors had explained that the type of stroke she suffered would require intensive rehabilitation, assuming she regained consciousness. The prospect of Linda's long recovery raised questions about the inn's future, questions that Rachel pushed aside for now, focusing instead on the immediate needs of Grace and the daily operations. As midnight approached, a nurse entered to check Linda's vitals. She smiled softly at the sight of Grace curled up in the chair, then noticed something unexpected. Linda's hand had moved slightly. It wasn't much, just a subtle twitch, but in the world of stroke recovery, every movement carried hope. The nurse quickly summoned Dr. Sarah, who performed a series of quick tests. "This is encouraging," she said quietly to Rachel, careful not to wake Grace. "Her body is fighting. The quick response this morning may have saved not just her life, but her chances for a meaningful recovery." Rachel's phone buzzed with a message from the night manager at Seabreeze. Rocky had finally settled down for the night, but not in his usual spot. Instead, the Parrot had positioned himself in Linda's private office, perched on the back of her chair, as if keeping watch over her domain. The next morning brought Grace's parents, Tom and Marie, rushing into the hospital room. Their faces showed the strain of their hurried journey and their worry for Linda. Grace woke to find herself enveloped in her parents' embrace, finally allowing herself to break down completely, releasing all the fear and tension she'd been holding inside. Marie, Linda's daughter, approached her mother's bedside with tears streaming down her face. The strong woman who had raised her, who had built Seabreeze Inn from nothing, now looked so fragile. Tom stood behind his wife, offering silent support while trying to maintain his composure for Grace's sake. Rachel took this opportunity to return to the inn, knowing Grace was now in her parents' care. As she drove along the coastal road, her mind wandered to the challenges ahead. Linda's recovery, if she recovered, would likely take months. The inn needed management. Grace needed stability. And somehow, they all needed to find a way forward. Arriving at Seabreeze, Rachel found Rocky exactly where she expected, making his morning rounds of the inn. The Parrot had developed a new routine, checking each room just as Linda would have done, ensuring everything was in order. The guests had begun leaving out treats for him, touched by his dedication and intelligence. Mrs. Henderson approached Rachel in the lobby, her face serious. "We've been talking," she said, gesturing to a group of regular guests. "We want to help. Linda has made this place more than just an inn. It's a family, and families stick together during difficult times." The offer of support brought fresh tears to Rachel's eyes. She had worked at Seabreeze long enough to know that Linda's influence extended far beyond the physical boundaries of the inn. The relationships she had built, the community she had created, these were her true legacy. Rocky landed on the reception desk, producing a perfect imitation of Linda's warm "good morning" greeting. The familiar sound echoed through the lobby, bringing both smiles and tears to those who heard it. The Parrot's unwavering dedication to maintaining Linda's presence in the inn had become a source of comfort for everyone. As Rachel settled behind the desk to begin the day's work, she realized that Seabreeze Inn's story was far from over. Linda's crisis had revealed the strength of the bonds she had created, between humans and animals, between guests and staff, between grandmother and granddaughter. These bonds would be tested in the days to come, but they would also provide the foundation for whatever challenges lay ahead. The morning sun streamed through the lobby windows, casting warm light on Rocky's feathers as he maintained his vigilant watch over the inn. Outside, the waves continued their eternal dance with the shore, a reminder that life, like the tide, moves in cycles of challenge and recovery, loss and renewal. Days at Seabreeze Inn fell into a new routine. Rachel managed the day-to-day operations, while Marie split her time between the hospital and helping at the inn. Tom had taken Grace back home to maintain some semblance of normalcy for their daughter, though she insisted on daily video calls to check on both her grandmother and Rocky. Linda's condition showed small but encouraging signs of improvement. Her consciousness returned gradually, like a tide slowly creeping up the shore. First came the subtle movements, a finger twitch, and flutter of eyelids. Then, one morning, she opened her eyes fully, though confusion clouded her gaze. The stroke had affected her speech and movement on her right side, but her recognition remained intact. When Marie showed her photos of Grace and Rocky on her phone, tears rolled down Linda's cheeks. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't form properly, leading to frustration that the doctors assured them was normal for stroke recovery. At the inn, Rocky's behavior continued to fascinate everyone. The Parrot had developed an uncanny ability to predict when something needed attention. He would flutter anxiously near leaking faucets before they became noticeable, alert staff to rooms that needed extra attention, and even warn the kitchen staff when something was about to burn. All tasks he had observed Linda performing over the years. Mrs. Henderson and other long-time guests had organized a support system. Some offered to help with administrative tasks. Others volunteered to maintain Linda's beloved garden, and a few even started a meal train for the staff working extra hours. The inn had always fostered a sense of community, but adversity had transformed that community into something remarkable. One particular morning, Rachel arrived to find Rocky acting strangely. The Parrot kept flying to Linda's office, then to the front desk, then back again, clearly agitated. Following his lead, Rachel discovered that several important insurance documents needed immediate attention, papers that Linda would have handled automatically. The bird's deep understanding of the inn's rhythms had once again proved invaluable. The physical therapist working with Linda reported steady progress, though the road ahead remained long. Linda had begun forming words again, though speech remained difficult. Her first clearly understood word was Grace, followed closely by Rocky. The medical staff were amazed by her determination, noting that her strong will was as much a part of her recovery as any treatment they provided. Marie spent hours by her mother's bedside, sharing updates about the inn and its guests. She told Linda about Rocky's continued vigilance, about the community's support, about how Grace insisted on sending her grandmother daily drawings of the sea. Though Linda couldn't respond fully, her eyes showed complete understanding, often filling with tears at particularly touching news. Back at Seabreeze, Rachel faced an unexpected challenge. A potential buyer, hearing about Linda's condition, had approached with an offer to purchase the inn. The offer was generous, but the thought of selling Linda's life's work felt wrong. Rachel kept the information to herself, not wanting to burden Marie with additional stress, but Rocky seemed to sense her distress. The Parrot began spending more time near Rachel, offering comfort in his own way. He would perch near her desk, perfectly imitating Linda's laugh or her common phrases of encouragement. These moments both comforted and pained Rachel, reminding her of both Linda's absence and her enduring influence. Grace's daily video calls became a bright spot for everyone. She would chat with Rachel, check on Rocky, and share stories about her day. The child's resilience amazed everyone. She spoke confidently about when, not if, her grandmother would return home. Her unwavering faith seemed to inspire those around her. During one of these calls, Rocky did something extraordinary. As Grace was describing her latest art project, a painting of Seabreeze Inn with her grandmother standing at the entrance, the Parrot flew to Linda's office and returned with one of her old business cards in his beak. He placed it gently in front of the camera, as if trying to tell Grace that her grandmother's presence was still very much alive in the inn. The physical therapy sessions grew more intense as Linda regained strength. Simple tasks like holding a spoon or turning a page became monumental achievements. The doctors were pleased with her progress, but cautioned that complete recovery would take time. Linda's determination never wavered. Each small victory seemed to fuel her desire to achieve more. One afternoon, while Marie was updating her mother about the inn, Linda managed to form a complete sentence. Rocky saved me. The effort exhausted her, but the smile that followed lit up the room. It was a breakthrough moment that brought tears to everyone's eyes. The idea of returning home began to feel more realistic. The medical team started discussing rehabilitation equipment that would need to be installed at the inn, modifications to Linda's living space, and the support system she would need. The inn's staff and guests immediately volunteered to help with whatever was needed. Rachel, still keeping the potential buyer's offer to herself, watched as the Seabreeze community rallied around these preparations. She observed Rocky's continued dedication, the guests' unwavering support, and Grace's persistent optimism. The inn was more than just a business. It was a living, breathing entity that Linda had created through years of care and attention. As she sat in Linda's office late one evening, reviewing the buyer's offer, Rocky landed on the desk. The Parrot picked up a photo of Linda and Grace that sat in a frame, then carefully placed it over the purchase offer papers. Rachel smiled, understanding the message. Some things were worth more than money. The sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Through the office window, Rachel could see guests walking on the beach, staff members checking in new arrivals, and the everyday magic of Seabreeze Inn continuing to unfold. Rocky perched nearby, ever watchful, ever present, a guardian of Linda's legacy, and a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary help comes from the most unexpected sources. Part 5. The day of Linda's return to Seabreeze Inn arrived with golden sunshine and gentle sea breezes. The medical team had worked with the staff to prepare everything she would need for her continued recovery. Her living quarters had been modified with safety equipment, and a schedule of home care visits was arranged. Rachel had transformed Linda's ground floor office into a temporary bedroom, making it easier for her to move around. The inn's regular guests had pitched in to help, bringing in comfortable furniture and decorating the space with photos of Grace, Rocky, and beautiful moments from the inn's history. Rocky's behavior on the morning of Linda's return was extraordinary. The Parrot seemed to sense the importance of the day, meticulously checking and rechecking every detail of the inn. He flew from room to room, ensuring everything was perfect, just as Linda would have done. When the medical transport arrived, Grace was the first to greet her grandmother, rushing forward with careful excitement. Linda's progress was evident. Though she still struggled with speech and needed a wheelchair, her eyes were bright and alert. She managed a warm smile as Grace hugged her gently. Rocky, who had been watching from his perch, flew directly to Linda's shoulder, his favorite spot from before her stroke. The reunion between woman and bird brought tears to everyone's eyes. Linda raised her left hand, still weak but improving, to stroke Rocky's feathers. The parrot leaned into her touch, producing a perfect imitation of her pre-stroke voice saying, "Welcome home." Part 6. The days that followed established new routines at Seabreeze Inn. Linda's recovery continued with determination and grace. Speech therapy sessions took place in her office, where Rocky would often participate by providing encouragement in Linda's own voice, a technique the therapists found remarkably effective. Grace spent weekends at the inn, reading stories to her grandmother and helping with simple tasks. The bond between them grew even stronger, with Grace showing maturity beyond her years in adapting to her grandmother's new needs. Rachel finally shared the story of the purchase offer with Linda and Marie. Linda's response, though slow and careful, was clear. "Not for sale." She gestured toward Rocky, then toward the guests visible through the window, emphasizing that Seabreeze was more than just property. It was a home, a community, a living thing. Rocky's protective behavior evolved as Linda grew stronger. The parrot began accompanying her during her physical therapy walks along the beach, flying close by as she gradually progressed from wheelchair to walker. When Linda would tire, Rocky would alert the staff by mimicking the precise tone of concern Linda had always used when guests needed help. Part 7. As seasons changed, Linda's recovery exceeded the doctor's expectations. Her speech, though never returning completely to normal, improved enough for clear communication. She regained enough mobility to move around the inn with minimal assistance, though she tired easily. The experience had transformed Seabreeze Inn in unexpected ways. Linda's struggle and recovery had strengthened the bonds within the inn's community. Regular guests became like family, staff members went above and beyond their duties, and Rocky's extraordinary actions had become legend along the coast. Grace, during one of her weekend visits, sat with her grandmother watching the sunset from the inn's porch. Rocky perched nearby, occasionally mimicking the sound of waves when the conversation lulled. Linda, her speech careful but clear, shared an important realization with her granddaughter. "Sometimes," she said, taking Grace's hand, "life's greatest gifts come in unexpected forms. Rocky wasn't just a pet, he was a guardian angel in feathers." She smiled as the parrot flew to her shoulder, nuzzling against her cheek. "And you, my dear, showed me that love and faith can work miracles." Rachel, observing from the doorway, reflected on how close they had come to losing everything. The purchase offer still sat in Linda's desk drawer, a reminder that life's true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars. The inn had emerged stronger, its community closer, its purpose clearer. Linda's recovery, though not complete, had plateaued at a point where she could still be part of daily life at Seabreeze. She had learned to adapt, to accept help when needed, and to appreciate the small victories each day brought. Her determined spirit, combined with the support of her family, staff, and guests, had turned potential tragedy into triumph. Rocky maintained his protective watch over the inn and its beloved owner, his intelligence and devotion a constant reminder of that fateful morning when he raised the alarm. The parrot's actions had not only saved Linda's life, but had also preserved the heart and soul of Seabreeze Inn. As darkness fell and stars began twinkling over the ocean, Linda sat contentedly surrounded by her family, both blood relatives and those brought together by circumstance and love. Rocky settled on his perch for the night, his mission fulfilled but his vigilance never ending. The inn's lights glowed warmly in the gathering dusk, a beacon of hope and community on the shoreline. Inside, guests shared stories of Rocky's heroism, of Linda's courage, of Grace's unwavering faith, and of the extraordinary power of love to heal and unite. Seabreeze Inn had always been special, but now it was extraordinary, a place where miracles happened, where family meant more than blood, and where a remarkable parrot had proven that heroes come in all forms. The waves continued their eternal dance with the shore, their rhythm a reminder that life, like the tide, brings both challenges and blessings. And sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, it brings miracles that change everything. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.